Galactic distress signal answered by Earth's war fleet. The signal hit us at 3:12 hours ship time. I was already awake. I had not slept more than 3 hours in the last 2 days, and the coffee in my mug had gone cold an hour ago. The bridge of S undying resolve hummed. Around me, 47 crew members at their posts, the stars outside the viewport, holding perfectly still the way stars always do when nothing in the universe seems to care about what you were going through. Then Lieutenant Owen Graves looked up from his sensor panel and said, "Commander Nosey, you need to see this." I put down the cold coffee and walked to a station. The signal was broadcasting on Galactic Standard Frequency. The encoding system Earth's intelligence teams had spent 11 years reverse engineering from captured alien communication arrays. We had cracked it well enough to read it. We had never expected to receive one. My name is Yaron Cozy. I command the 3rd Combined Expeditionary Fleet of the Earth Space Authority, which consists of 47 warships, 190,000 crew members, and enough firepower to crack a moon if someone gave us a reason. We were 6 weeks into a deep-range patrol near the outer edge of the solar systems, or cloud, so far from Earth that a round-trip signal took 11 hours. Out here, the stars were thick and cold and completely indifferent. Out here you got used to silence. The signal was not silent. Owen pulled it up on the main display, translating the Galactic Standard encoding in real time. The text rolled across the screen in short, broken lines because whoever had sent it was not sending from a place of comfort. They were sending from a place where every second mattered, and they knew it. The signal read, "This is the Velshire Home Authority broadcasting on all emergency frequencies. Our system is under attack by the K-Dominion. 3 planets are burning. Our orbital defenses are gone. We are requesting immediate assistance from any receiving party. We do not expect rescue. We broadcast only so someone will know we existed. If you receive this and you are within range, do not come. They will destroy you as well. Remember us. That is all we ask. Remember that the Velshire lived." The bridge went very quiet. I read it twice. Then I read it a 3rd time, not because I did not understand it the first time, but because I wanted to make sure I understood every part of what it was actually saying. It was not just a distress call. It was something rarer and harder to read. It was a farewell from people who had already accepted that no one was coming and had decided to use their last broadcast to warn strangers away rather than beg them for help. Owen was watching me. Everyone on the bridge was watching me, even the ones pretending to look at their screens. What do we know about the Velshire? I asked. Senior Intelligence Officer Diane Lowe pulled up her data files. Diane had short red hair and the particular kind of calm that comes from spending a decade reading classified reports about things that would give most people nightmares. She did not look disturbed. She looked focused. "Insectoid species," she said. "Approximately 4 billion population across 3 inner planets and 2 colony stations. Predominant civilization in the orange cluster, about 640 light years from our current position. Known to be non-aggressive. Agricultural economy, limited military capability. They've been listed in alien intelligence archives as a protected species under galactic compact agreements, but those compacts apparently mean nothing to the K and the Keth Dominion. Diane's expression shifted just slightly. 11 civilizations destroyed in the last 2 centuries. Expansionist military empire, there. Doctrine is total subjugation followed by resource extraction. They don't leave. Survivors as a policy, commander. Survivors remember, they don't want anything to remember. I turned back to the signal on the screen. The Velar had told us not to come. They had been specific about it. They had encoded the warning into the same transmission as their cry for help, because they were thoughtful people even at the end. Because they did not want to be the reason more people died. I thought about that for a moment. I thought about what kind of person sends a warning inside a distress call instead of just screaming for help. I thought about the kind of quiet courage that required. Then I thought about the K-Dominion and 11 destroyed civilizations. And I thought about what the number 12 would look like on that list. Lieutenant Commander Felix Carr was standing at the navigation station 3M to my left. Felix was one of the best navigators in the fleet, which was saying something, because the S authority did not hire anyone who was not exceptional at what they did. He was already calculating something on his secondary screen, and I could see from his posture that he already knew what I was going to say. Before I said it, Felix, I said 640 light years. How long at maximum drive? He did not hesitate. 17 days for hours. Commander, if we push the drives hard, can the drives take that? The engineers will complain. The engineers always complain. Yes, Commander. I looked at the signal one more time. We broadcast only so someone will know we existed. The Velar had accepted their fate. They had accepted it with more dignity than most species manage in their best moments, let alone their last ones. They had not screamed. They had not begged. They had warned strangers away and asked only to be remembered. I keyed the shipwide comms. The channel opened across all 47 ships in the fleet simultaneously. 190,000 people who trusted me to make the right calls. This is Commander Nossi, I said, and my voice was steady because that was what they needed from me. We have received a galactic standard distress signal from species called the Velar, 640 light-year from our current position. They are under attack and they are asking us not to come. I paused for exactly 1 second. We are going anyway. All ships set course for the signals. Origin maximum drive. Engineering teams prep for extended high output runs. Medical prepare trauma protocols. Weapons, I want all systems at full readiness in 12 hours. Another pause. This is what we are for. Let's move. The response was not cheering. The response was the sound of 190,000 people getting to work. Owen Graves looked at me after the channel closed. He was 26 years old, from a small town in Wales, and he had a habit of asking the questions that everyone else was thinking but not saying out loud. Commander, he said carefully, the signal specifically told us not to come. It did. I agreed. That was the only kind of invitation we needed, wasn't it? I picked up my cold coffee and took a sip. It tasted terrible. Get some sleep, Lieutenant. You have 6 hours before your next shift, and I'm going to need you sharp. He nodded and went back to his station. I stayed at the viewport for a while, watching the stars that did not move, thinking about 4 billion people on 3 burning planets who had used their last signal to warn us away. We were going anyway. We were always going to go anyway. That was the thing about humans. that the rest of the galaxy had not yet learned. We had spent 80 years as a spacefaring species, and all 80 of those years had been hard. We had fought wars against ourselves that nearly ended everything. We had clawed our way out into the vacuum, not because the stars were beautiful, though they were, but because we refused to stay in the place where things were threatening us. We moved toward problems. It was instinct. It was bone deep and old, and it had kept us alive through things that should have finished us 100 times over. The Velar had said, "Do not come, they will destroy you too." They did not know what we were. I set the drive to maximum and watched the stars begin to move. 17 days later, the undying resolve dropped out of faster than light travel at the edge of the Velar home system, and I saw the fires. The fires were on the planets below us, 3 of them, the 3 inner worlds the Velar called home, lit from beneath by the kind of sustained orbital bombardment that does not leave much standing. The light from the fires was visible even at this distance, orange and red against the dark, like someone had cracked those worlds open and let the heat out. The rest of the 47 ships in our fleet emerged from faster than light travel in sequence around us, forming up in the configuration I had ordered during the journey here, and for a moment the entire bridge was silent as everyone looked at what we had arrived into. Then my tactical officer, Commander Ruth Adley, said in a perfectly level voice, "I have 312 KE warships on long-range sensors. Commander, they are positioned throughout the inner system. They're not in combat formation. They are in a completion pattern." Completion, that was the word for what the Keth did when the fighting was over and the work of systematically destroying everything that remained was underway. I looked at the fires on those 3 planets. All ships, I said quietly, weapons free. Engage. The signal reached us at the same moment the K noticed we existed. The Kef warship that hailed us was enormous. Everything about the K was enormous because they had spent 2 centuries building their military against opponents who were smaller and less coordinated, and they had learned that size was impressive. That size made other species hesitate. That size communicated a very simple message: you cannot fight this. The ship that moved toward us was 3 times the length of the undying resolve, plated in dark composite armor the color of cooled metal, its weapons arrays visible even at long range because the KE did not bother concealing them. Why would they? No one had ever made them regret showing their weapons before they fired them. The hail came through in Galactic Standard, and Diane translated it in real time on my secondary screen. It read, "Unidentified vessels, identify your species and provide the coordinates of your home world for processing." Processing, that was the KE word for what came after they finished with the planet you were standing on. They process civilizations the way machine processes material efficiently and without particular feeling. I did not respond to the hail immediately. I had other things to do first. Owen, I said, broadcast our formation orders on the open channel, all frequencies, including the ones the Kef are monitoring. I want them to see this. Owen looked at me for just a moment, understanding something, then turned to his panel. I, Commander. What the K saw next was something they had not seen before. They had arrived in the Velour system 3 weeks ago and done what they always did, which was advance in overwhelming numbers, and allow the weight of their presence to do most of the work before they fired a single weapon. Most species, when confronted with 300 warships, began making calculations about survival. Most species arranged themselves in defensive patterns, pulling back toward whatever they considered most important, trying to protect something rather than threaten someone. Most species fought the way animals that know they are outmatched fight, reactively, desperately, with one eye already on the exit. 47 human ships reconfigured an open space while the Kef watched. Not defensively, not into a protective screen around anything we were trying to hold. We held nothing here. We had nothing to protect except each other. Instead, the 47 ships of the Third Combined Expeditionary Fleet moved into a configuration that any Earth military historian would have recognized. Immediately, a hunting spread. Formation developed over decades of hard, close quarters combat in the asteroid belts and orbital corridors of our own solar system during the wars against the Martian separatist movements and the resource conflicts of 2089 to 21,104. Overlapping fields of fire, coordinated strike assignments, interlocking missile corridors calculated to arrive at target clusters within microsecond sons of each other. Kill boxes. We were not arranging ourselves to survive. We were arranging ourselves to attack. The KE warship hailed us a second time. The translation appeared on my screen. Unidentified vessels, this is your final notification to comply. Identify your species and your home world coordinates. Non-compliance will result in your destruction. I keyed the fleet-wide channel. All ships strike formation. Confirmed. Target priority list is uploaded and locked. Propulsion systems first, then power cores, then weapons. We are not here to exchange fire with 300 ships. We are here to take apart 300 ships, one system at a time. Confirm. Receipt. 46 commanders across 47 ships. Confirmed receipt. Then I answered the KE hail. This is Commander Yarnos of the Earth Space Authority. I said, my voice going out across all frequencies so that every K ship in the system would hear it. We received the Velshire distress signal 17 days ago. We came because that is what you do when someone asks for help. I'm not going to give you our home world coordinates. I'm going to give you one opportunity to withdraw your forces from this system. You have 5 minutes. It was a long pause. I could imagine what was happening on the KE command ship. Commanders consulting each other. Intelligence officers running calculations. Someone pointing out that 47 ships against 312 was a ratio that only went one way, and that ratio was not in our favor. I could imagine the conclusion they reached because it was the logical conclusion, the mathematical conclusion, the one that every previous adversary of the K had already accepted. Before the battle even started, the K did not withdraw. Their 312 ships began to move toward us. I watched them on the tactical display for a moment. 312 contacts, each one representing a warship larger than most of ours, moving with the slow confidence of something that had never learned to be afraid of an adversary because no adversary had ever given it reason to be. Ruth Adley said from the tactical station there, moving to engagement range. Commander, weapons are cycling up across the entire KE formation. Estimated time to first salvo for minutes. Counter battery Targeting ready, ready. Evasive pattern. Delta 7 loaded and distributed across. The fleet confirmed. I looked at the main display at the 312 moving contacts. At the fires still burning on 3 planets below, and I thought about the Velar Elder who had encoded a warning into her last broadcast instead of a plea. I thought about the 11 civilizations before the Velar, each one of them reduced to a line item in Keth records, each one of them gone. Ruth, I said, when their first salvo launches, execute Delta 7 immediately across all ships, no exceptions, no dation. The moment those weapons leave their tubes, we move, understood, then we return. Fire, full simultaneous broadside from all 47 ships, target priority list as distributed, propulsion first. She nodded, eyes on her screens. Commander. I sat back in my command chair and watched the Cath come toward us, and I thought about something one of my instructors had told me at the Earth Space Authority Academy a long time ago, when I was 22 years old and still learning what it meant to command people in dangerous places. She had said, every adversary you will ever face has a story they tell themselves about what kind of opponent they're going to meet. Part of her job before the first weapon is ever fired is to make them understand that they are about to meet a completely different story. The Kef had a story. It was a story about an unstoppable empire, and 11 destroyed civilizations and 3 burning planets. And in that story, the 47 ships that had just arrived at the edge of their formation were a minor inconvenience that would be gone in an hour. I was about to rewrite that story. For them, the KE first salvo launched at 4 minutes and 7 seconds, exactly when Ruth had predicted. Enormous energy, weapons and projectile systems from 312 ships simultaneously, a wall of incoming fire that would have looked to anyone watching from outside the system like a small star being born for just a moment. Every single ship in the third combined expeditionary fleet moved. Delta 7 was an evasive pattern designed for exactly this situation, not for fighting a numerically superior opponent in a straightforward exchange, but for fighting a numerically superior opponent who had never encountered an adversary that trained specifically for this kind of situation. Earth's military had spent decades studying our own worst conflicts, and the most brutal truth our history had taught us was that a smaller force could defeat a larger one if a smaller force was faster, more coordinated, and had already planned for what the larger force was going to do. We had studied every piece of KE combat data. We had collected over 30 years of intelligence work. We knew their weapons cycling rates. We knew their targeting algorithms. We knew the average reaction time of a KE weapons officer between target acquisition and trigger. We had built Delta 7 around all of that data, and Delta 7 was designed to put every ship in our fleet in a position that was not where the K weapons were aimed, in the brief window between when Keth targeting locked and when KE weapons actually fired. The wall of fire swept through the space where we had been. Most of it missed, not all of it. 3 of our ships took glancing hits, their shields absorbing partial impacts, whole warnings flashing across the damage reports on my secondary screen. None of them went offline, none of them broke formation. Then we returned fire. 47 ships fired simultaneously, the broadside coordinated to the microscond by the fleet-shared tactical network. And the targets are not the KE weapons. Arrays. Not their shields, not the bridges of their warships where they commanders sat, the targets were there. Engines, every missile, every directed energy weapon, every kinetic round from 47 human ships in the same instant aimed at the propulsion systems of the leading K formation. The first 30 K ships lost their engines in the same 4-second window. The battle changed shape. Immediately, 30 immobile warships in the middle of a formation of 300 was not a catastrophe on its own. The KE had the numbers to absorb that and keep advancing, but 30 immobile warships in a carefully designed kill box in a formation that had now closed around them was something different. The ships behind them had to adjust, the ships too. The sides had to compensate. The perfect mechanical advance of 312 warships became for the first time something that had to think about itself, thinking cost. Time is what a smaller, faster fleet uses. I watched the tactical display and I directed the fleet through the gaps that opened up as the KE formation adapted, and I thought about the Valera and what they had built on those 3 planets over however many thousands of years their civilization had existed, and I kept working. The Kef were not poor fighters. I want to be clear about that because it matters. They adapted quickly once they understood what we were doing. Within 20 minutes they had recognized the propulsion targeting doctrine and began cycling their shield power toward their engine compartments, which meant less shield coverage elsewhere, which meant our weapons were finding hole plating instead of energy barriers. Within 40 minutes they had reconfigured their formation into a series of smaller, independent groups rather than one large mass, which was tactically smarter and forced us to distribute our fire across more targets instead of concentrating. They were good, they were just not prepared for us. At the 55-minute mark, the S cavalry took a direct hit to her port side from a concentrated K salvo. 3 ships had focused their fire on her specifically, recognizing that she was one of our longest range strike platforms and that eliminating her would degrade our ability to hit targets at the outer edges of the KE formation. Cavalry shields held for the first 2 impacts. They did not hold for the third. The cavalry broke apart in 11 seconds. I noted the time and logged it, and redistributed her strike assignments to the ships on her flanks without stopping on my command screen, alongside the tactical display and the weapon status readouts. The second window opened automatically, the way it always did when a ship went down. It began filling with names, 3,814 names, the complete crew manifest of the S cavalry rolling upward in small white text as the system logged them. I did not read the names while the battle was happening. I never did. There was a reason for that, and it was not that I did not care. It was that I cared enough to make sure the battle ended right, because that was the only thing I could do for them. Now we grieve when it is over. We always have. At 1 hour and 32 minutes, a signal came from somewhere inside the K formation, not a weapon signature, a communication. Diane flagged it and translated it in seconds and read it aloud to me from her station. It's from the KE command ship. Commander, she said, it's addressed to us. Specifically, it says. She paused and something in her voice shifted just slightly, just enough for me to notice. It says, what are you? I looked at the tactical display. 87 KET ships were offline, 41 had been destroyed outright. The remaining 184 were still fighting. But their formation was fragmented and their advance had stopped. I did not answer the Keth commander's question. I had a battle to finish, but the question stayed with me, the word they used. Diane told me later after the battle was over and the guns had finally gone quiet, the word the KE commander had used in their own language for what we were. It was a word in the KE vocabulary that had no clean translation into English. The closest Diane could manage was a thing that should not exist in this context. I thought that was probably accurate. At 2 hours and 40 minutes, the remaining KE ships did something the Kef had apparently never done before in the recorded history of their military campaigns. They retreated, not all of them. 80 of them jumped to faster than light travel and were gone in less than 3 minutes, withdrawing from the system in a way that the KE tactical database, which we captured from a disabled command ship later that week, would record as a strategic redeployment. They could call what they wanted. The remaining ships that could not jump in time were either captured or destroyed over the following 4 hours as a third combined expeditionary fleet methodically swept the Velshire system clean of every KE presence. When it was over, I stood at the viewport for a long time. The planets below had stopped receiving new fire. The fires already burning would take time to go out on their own, the way fires always do when the damage has already been done, but no new ones were starting. The system was ours, which was not a phrase that felt right because the system was not ours. It belonged to whoever was left on those 3 planets below, if anyone was left. Long-range ground scan complete. Commander, he said, we're picking up heat signatures consistent with large enclosed populations in underground structures, bunkers on all 3 planets, millions of contacts. I closed my eyes for just a moment. Medial, they were alive, some of them, perhaps many of them, were still alive in the deep places of their burning worlds, waiting to see what happened next. Give me landing teams, I said, medical, engineering, and diplomatic liaison. I want to be on the ground within 6 hours. Commander, I looked at the closed list of cavalry crew members on my secondary screen. 3,814 names. I read every one of them before I went asleep that night, because that was the other part of the rule. You keep working during the battle, and then when it is over, you read the names, every single one. The underground chambers smelled like stone and old air, and something faintly sweet that Diane told me was the sure equivalent of candles. Small lights they burned in their underground spaces to make the darkness feel less like a trap and more like a home. The lights were everywhere. Hundreds of small blue flames in carve holders along the corridor walls, and they cast moving shadows across the faces of the Velar who watched our landing team enter their shelter. They were small. I had read the intelligence file that described them as insectoid, which was technically accurate but did not prepare me for the particular way their large compound eyes caught the blue candle light, or the careful, precise way they moved, or the way the youngest ones, who looked like nothing so much as children, pressed close to the adults around them without making a sound. I was the first human most of them had ever seen. I was 6 feet tall in my uniform, broad-shouldered, and I had Walked into their shelter with 4 members of my crew after announcing our presence for 20 minutes through communicator and Galactic Standard to make sure no one was frightened by an unexpected arrival. Several of the Vel still stepped back when I entered. Several others stepped forward, which I respected more than I could say. Elder came to meet me. She was not the tallest or the largest of her people. She was identifiable as Elder by the pale coloration that had developed across her upper thorax, a sign of age in her species that Diane had briefed me on during the descent. She walked steadily and her compound eyes were fixed on me with an attention that felt, despite everything different about her, entirely familiar. It was the look of someone who had been through something terrible and had come out the other side, and was now trying to understand what the other side was going to look like. Her name, given in Galactic Standard translation, was Sevalov. She inclined her head to me when she stopped 2 meters away, a formal greeting gesture that her species used with those they did not yet know. I inclined my head back. I had practiced the gesture on the way down. Something shifted in her eyes. She said something in her own language, and the small translation device on my wrist rendered it in my earpiece a second later. You came, she said. We told you not to come. You did. I agreed. Many of your people did not come back from this. She said, we saw the ship that was destroyed. We were watching from below. With the sensors we have left 3,814 people. I said, yes, they died for us. I thought about how to answer that. They died doing what they came here to do. I said, finally, that's not the same thing as being wasted. They knew what they were coming into, so did everyone else in my fleet. We came anyway. Self was quiet for a long moment around her. In the corridor in the chamber beyond, hundreds of Elcher were watching this conversation. Some of them were very young, some of them were injured. Medical teams from my ships were already moving through the shelter behind me, my people working gently and carefully with the Velshire medical staff who had been keeping everyone alive down here, sharing supplies and equipment, and the particular focus competence that human field medics developed after years of practice in hard conditions. Why? Seelith asked. It was such a simple question, just one word. I had expected something more complicated, some negotiation, some formal exchange, credentials. Just why? Because you asked. I said, you broadcast a signal. You told us you were in trouble. The fact that you also told us not to come does not change the part where you were in trouble. We expected no one to answer. I know we had accepted what was happening. I know that too. I looked at her steadily, but acceptance is not the same as deserving it. You did not deserve what was happening, so we came. Seville studied me for a long moment with those compound eyes that I could not read the way I could read a human face. But that somehow still communicated something. Then she made a small gesture with her upper limbs, something that my translation device flagged as an expression of acknowledgement that went deeper than a simple thank you. It was the kind of gesture you made when words were not quite enough for what you were feeling. I understood that entirely. Your people need medical attention and structural assessment of these shelters, I said, gently returning to the practical things, the things I was better at then. The emotional ones. My teams are ready to help with both. We also need to talk about what happens above ground and what your people need in the coming weeks. But that can happen over time, right? Now, I just wanted you to know that the situation above is clear. The KE ships that were still functional have left the system. You are safe for now, for now. She repeated, I won't lie to you. I said the Keth will not forget this, and we will need to have honest conversations about what that means. But right now, today, the immediate danger is over. She was quiet for another moment, then she asked, how many of your ships are here? 46. We lost one in the battle and will more come. I thought about the message I had already sent to Earth Command. I thought about the response that had come back 18 hours later, direct from the Earth Space Authority's Senior Council. I thought about what it meant that the response had contained not a reprimand for engaging without authorization, not a demand that I hold position and await orders, but a simple, clear confirmation. Yes, I said, more coming, a lot more. Seelith's compound eyes caught the blue candle light. Why would they send more? Because this is where we are needed, I said. And because the Kef need to understand something that they did not understand before today. They need to understand what it means to have made an enemy of Earth. She was quiet for so long that I thought she might not answer at all. Then she made that gesture again, the one that went deeper than a simple thank you, and she said in Galactic Standard, we will remember you, Eurycy. We said we only wanted to be remembered. We did not imagine we would have the chance to do the remembering ourselves. I looked at the small blue flames along the corridor walls, all those little lights that her people had carried into the dark with them to make it feel less like the end of everything. You are not alone anymore, I said. The captured Kef warship was called the Vithuras, which translated roughly from K military language as absolute authority, which told you everything you needed to know about how the Kef named their ships. It was massive, even docked against the undying resolve, its hull pocked with weapon strikes from the battle, 3 of its engine nodes dark and cold. My engineering teams had spent 2 days making it safe to board and another 2 days clearing it, and now it sat in a holding position while my crew worked through its systems and cataloged everything they found. There was a great deal to catalog. The KE commander who had survived was named Vithan, which Diane told me was a title name construction in K culture, indicating someone who had achieved the highest rank of field commander. He had been brought aboard the Undying Resolve 4 days after the battle, once our medical teams had stabilized his injuries, and once I had time to think carefully about what I wanted to say to him. I met him in a secure conference room on Deck 7 with Diane Lowe present as translator and 2 of my security officers standing at the door. Bethan was large even by K standards. His species was bipedal and heavily built with dense bone structure under a layer of dark-cowled skin and 4 upper limbs that ended in something between fingers and claws. His injuries have been treated by my medical team, which I could tell from the bandaging visible on 2 of his upper limbs. He sat across the table from me and looked at me with a particular expression of someone who was trying to decide whether their current situation was temporary or permanent. I let him settle into his chair before I spoke. Commander, I said, and Diane translated, I'm going to tell you what I plan to do with you, because I believe in being direct. He said, nothing, watching me. I am not going to harm you, I said, And I'm not going to hold you indefinitely. I'm going to send you home. Something changed in his expression. It was subtle, but it was there. I'm sending you home, I continued, with three things. First, full tactical footage of the engagement in the Velshire system, every second of it, from our sensors and from the sensors of capture KE ships. I want your military council to see exactly what happened and exactly how. Second, a complete record of our weapon systems, our formation tactics, and our fleet coordination protocols, not because I want to share technology, because I want your commanders to understand that what happened here was not luck and was not a special circumstance. It is what we do. I paused. Third, a message, he spoke. Then for the first time, Diane translated what message that Earth has established a defensive presence in this sector. I said that the Velshire home system and all surviving Shur population centers are now under the protection of the Earth Space Authority, that any KE military action directed at this system or at Velshire people anywhere will be considered a direct act of hostility against Earth, and that if the Keth Dominion chooses to test that statement, we will respond accordingly. V. Thorin was silent for a long moment, then he said something, and Diane translated it. You are one fleet, 47 ships. The Dominion has thousands. We know. I said, you understand what a full Dominion military response would look like? We do, and you're not deterred by that. I looked at him steadily. Commander, we have been at war within our own species for most of our recorded history. We have fought each other in conditions that most civilizations would consider impossible to survive. We have destroyed each other's cities and rebuilt them. We have pushed each other to the edge of extinction and come back. We know what large-scale conflict looks like. We know what it costs. We know how to live inside it and how to finish it. I folded my hands on the table. The question is not whether we are deterred. Question is whether the Keth Dominion is prepared for the kind of fight that Earth will bring if you continue what you were doing in this system. He was quiet for a long time, then he said something that Diane translated carefully, word by word, the word our Admiral used when he asked what you were. In our language, it means a thing that should not exist in this context. I remember I said I understand now why he asked it. Bethorin said, nothing we have encountered before moved the way your fleet moved. Nothing we have encountered before targeted engines first, before weapons, before shields. We have never had an adversary that planned specifically around our own tactical database. We work hard, I said. Simply, he made a sound that might have been something like a short, involuntary response of surprise. Then he said, what do you want from this? You came here for people you did not know. You lost your own people doing it. You have captured a KE command ship and its commander, and you're going to send both of us home. What is the outcome you're actually trying to achieve? I thought about Seelef in the corridor with the blue candle flames. I thought about her asking why just that one word, and the look in her compound eyes when I told her she was not alone anymore. I thought about 3,814 names on a screen that I had read one by one after the battle was over. I want the KT Dominion to stop. I said that is the entire outcome. I want you to stop doing what you have been doing to 11 civilizations and counting. I want the galaxy to be a place where a species can Send a distress signal and have someone answer it and have that actually mean something. I want the number to stop at 11. I looked at him. The Velar were going to be 12. They are not 12. I would like very much for there to never be a 12. Thorin was silent. Go home, I said. Take the footage, take the records, take the message, tell your military council what happened here, and then I would strongly recommend that your leadership think very carefully about what kind of conflict they want to begin with. A species that answers distress calls by sending a war fleet. He left 2 days later on a repaired shuttle. Tactical footage and the records loaded into a ship's data cores. The message from Earth Space Authority formally encoded and authenticated. I watched the shuttle leave on the tracking display, and then I went back to work. There was a great deal of work to do. The Velar shelters had been opened to the surface in the areas where the fires had burned out, and the air quality had returned to breathable levels. My engineering teams were working alongside Velara construction crews on the preliminary assessments of what could be repaired and what would need to be rebuilt from the ground up, which was most of it. Medical teams were still working around the clock. Supplies were being transported down from ship stores and from the emergency caches we carried for exactly this kind of situation, because the Earth Space Authority had decided a long time ago that if we were going to be a military force operating in deep space, we should be capable of doing more than destroying things. We should be capable of putting things back together too. On the 8th day after the battle, the response came from Earth Command. I was in my cabin reading crew reports when Owen knocked and came in with a data tablet, and the look on his face told me before he said anything that what was on the tablet was significant from Earth Command. Commander, he said, mark priority 1. I took the tablet and read it. The Earth Space Authority Senior Council had reviewed the complete record of the Velshire engagement, the tactical data, the diplomatic exchange with Sevaluf, and the release of Commander Thorin. They had convened an emergency session of the full council. They had consulted with the Earth Diplomatic Corps and the military chiefs and the scientific advisory board. Their response was 4 paragraphs long, but the essential content was in the first sentence of the second paragraph. It read, the Earth Space Authority formally declares the Velar home system and all adjacent space within the Orin cluster to be under Earth defensive protection, effective immediately. The remaining 10 combined expeditionary fleets are being redirected to this sector. Estimated arrival of advanced elements 60 days, 10 more fleets, 47 ships in each combined expeditionary fleet, 470 more warships. I put the tablet down on my desk and sat with that number for a moment. It was a significant commitment. It was the kind of commitment that told you something about how the people making the decision were thinking about whether they considered what I had started here to be a mistake to be managed or a direction to be followed. They had followed. Owen was watching me with the particular expression he used when he wanted to ask something but was not sure if this was the right moment. Say it, I said. Are we at war, Commander, with the Keth Dominion? I thought about the question. We were at war with the KTH the moment the Valor sent that signal, and we decided to answer it. I said we just hadn't told them yet. Owen considered that, and now we've told them. Now we've told them. He nodded slowly. How do you Think they'll respond? I thought about V. Thorne's question sitting across the table from me in the secure conference room. What are you actually trying to achieve? And I thought about the answer I had given him and the look on his face when I said it, and then I thought about the footage we had sent home with him. 47 ships against 312, and the result at the end of it. I think I said carefully that there's a possibility the KT Dominion contains people who are capable of doing a calculation, and the calculation is this: 11 civilizations were conquered at relatively low cost because none of them were the kind of species that answers distress signals by sending a war fleet. We are that kind of species. The cost of continuing is going to be different from anything they have experienced before. I paused. Whether their leadership is capable of making that calculation, honestly, I don't know. Not all leadership is, but the option is on the table. Owen left after that, and I sat in my cabin for a while with the lights of the Velera system outside my small viewport, the fires almost all out now, the 3 planets below dark but no longer burning, beginning the slow and enormous process of becoming survivable again. 6 months after the battle in the Velera system, I was sitting in a room I had not wanted to be in, at a table I had not expected to sit at, surrounded by representatives of 10 different species who had come to the same location in the Orange Cluster for reasons that would not have existed 6 months ago. The diplomatic summit had not been my idea. It had been suggested simultaneously by 4 different species through 4 different channels, all of them reaching out to Earth within the same 2-week period after the news of what had happened in the Velera system spread through the galactic community. The way news always spreads slowly at first and then all at once. I was not a diplomat. I had made this clear to Earth Command in the strongest terms available to a senior military officer communicating with her superiors. I was a fleet commander. I was significantly better at directing weapons fire than at negotiating political agreements. I had told them this in a message that was as direct as I could make it without being insubordinate. Earth Command had responded that they appreciated my perspective and that I was the right person for this assignment, and that my diplomatic liaison officer would handle the formal procedural elements. My diplomatic liaison officer was Lieutenant Commander Petra Hall, who was 29 years old, had a doctorate in Xenlinguistics, and had the particular quality that the very best diplomats have, which is that she could say something difficult in a way that made the person hearing it feel that they had been respected rather than managed. I was deeply grateful for Petra. She was sitting 2 seats to my left, and she had already in the first hour of the summit smoothly redirected 3 separate conversations that were heading somewhere unhelpful. The room itself was on a station that the Velera had built for exactly this purpose in the 3 months since their surface areas had become safe enough to begin large-scale construction again. That was something I had not expected. How fast the Velero worked when they had the resources and the safety to work. They were extraordinarily organized and methodical, and with Earth engineering support and the supplies that the advanced elements of the incoming fleet had brought, they had put up the station framework in 6 weeks. It was not beautiful, but it was functional, and it had a large meeting room with space for all the representatives, and that was what mattered. The 10 species around the table were all different from each other, in ways that made the room visually remarkable. They were the Velura, represented by Seelith herself, who sat with a quiet steadiness that I found deeply calming to be near. There were the Marin Soul, a tall, thin, pale-skinned species from the far side of the cluster who had sent an ambassador named Dav Solace after receiving the battle footage through back channel networks. There were the Garin, quadruple, covered in short gray fur, who had lost a colony to the KTH-40 years ago and had been living in enforced isolation ever since. And there were 7 others, each of them representing a different story of having learned to make themselves very small and very quiet in a galaxy where the KE had taught everyone that visibility was dangerous. They were not small and quiet anymore. They were here. The first session of the summit covered practical security matters, which species needed immediate defensive support, what the current assessment of KET military movements in the sector looked like, and what the arrival schedule of Earth's incoming fleets meant for the overall protective capacity in the Orin cluster. I handled most of this section because it was within my competence, and Petra handled the parts that required careful framing around the political sensitivities of each species present. The second session was harder. Solace of the Marin Soul raised the central question in the 3rd hour of the second session, and he raised it directly, which I respected. He said, "We have heard what Earth did here. We have seen the tactical record. We know what the cost was. The question that all of us around this table need to ask, and the question we have been too polite to ask directly until now, is this: what does Earth want in return?" Every representative at the table shifted slightly when he asked it. It was the question they had all been carrying since they arrived, the one that experience had taught them to ask, because nothing came without cost, and generosity from a stronger power always meant something was owed. I looked at Petra, who gave me the slightest nod. "That meant this one is yours." "Nothing," I said. "Silence." Dav Solace watched me with the dark, calm eyes of his species. "Nothing," he repeated. "Nothing that you owe us." I said, "We came because someone asked for help. We stayed because the situation required it. We are establishing a defensive presence in this sector because the alternative is to leave and allow the K to resume what they were doing, and that is not an outcome we are willing to accept." I paused. "We are not here to build an empire. We had that option on our own planet many times, and we learned a very long time ago what empires cost. We are not interested in what the KTH were doing in this sector. We are interested in ending it." The room was quiet. Then one of the Garin representatives, a female whose name Petra had given me as Raven Soul, made a sound in her own language that Petra quietly translated in my earpiece as something between an expression of disbelief and a careful question. Raven Soul then spoke in Galactic standard slowly, as if choosing each word carefully. "You're asking us to believe that a species capable of what we saw in this system, the battle record, is very clear about what you're capable of, is choosing to use that capability for protection rather than control. You understand why that is difficult for us to accept." "Understand completely," I said. "We are not asking you to trust us because we say we are trustworthy. We are asking you to observe what we actually do over time and make your judgment based on that." I looked around. The table, every species here has reason to be cautious about powerful outsiders. Making promises, every species here has had experiences that make promises mean less than actions. We are not promising anything, we're showing up. We showed up when the sheriff sent a signal. We showed up when the KE had 300 ships in this system. We're showing up now at this table. What we do next and the next time after that, in the time after that, is what you should be watching, Raven. Soul was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, the Garen have young people who want to learn to fight, not because we want to make war, because we have spent 40 years being afraid, and afraid is not something we want our children to grow up being. I looked at her steadily. Send them to us, I said. We have training facilities. We know how to teach this. The summit continued for 4 more days. By the end of it, 8 of the 10 species present had signed preliminary cooperation agreements with Earth. The Garen had formally requested a military education partnership. The Marin Soul had offered access to their sensor network, which covered a significant portion of the Orin cluster and would substantially improve early warning capability in the region. The Velura had offered something else, something that took me a moment to understand. When Sevalith presented it formally on the final day, they had created a record, not a tactical record or a political record, a historical record carefully compiled of everything the Keth Dominion had done across all 11 civilizations they had conquered, gathered from survivors, from intercepted records, from everything the Velshire Intelligence Service had been quietly assembling for years before the attack came. It was Sealef told me one of the most complete accounts of Keth military history in existence. We built it because we believe someone should. No, she said, we did not believe anyone would be in a position to use it. I thought about what you could do with a complete strategic picture of KE military doctrine, KE political structure, KE supply lines, and KE internal decision-making processes. I thought about what that information was worth to Earth Command. I thought about what it said about the Velar, that they had built this archive even while accepting that they might not survive to share it. Thank you, I said, and meant it more than I had words for. On the last evening of the summit, I received a private signal from Petra that an internal KE communication had been intercepted by the Marin Soul sensor network and forwarded to our intelligence channels. Diane decoded it within an hour and brought it to me in my temporary quarters on the station. It was an internal KE document, not a military communique, a political one. It was addressed from a collective of what the translation identified as junior ranked KE governance officials, referred to in the document as wardens, to a set of recipients that Diane's analysis identified as being outside the main KE military command structure. It was not a formal diplomatic communique. It was something more careful than that. It was an inquiry, a quiet, cautious, carefully worded inquiry asking whether the Earthspace Authority would be willing to discuss under specific and private conditions a potential change in the internal direction of the Keth Dominion. It used language that made it clear that the people sending it were not the people currently making decisions, and that the people currently making decisions did not know this message existed. It was in plain language, an approach from people inside the K Dominion who were considering changing their own government, I read it twice. Then I looked at Diane, who was watching me with a particular expression she used when she thought something was significant. Have we dealt with anything like this before? She asked. Yes, I said. On Earth several times in different contexts with different outcomes. Depending on how it was handled. Do you know how to handle it? I thought about that. I thought about the long and complicated history of human politics and the various times in our past when internal change had been supported from outside, and what had gone wrong and what had gone right, and what the difference between those outcomes had been. We had made mistakes. We had made serious mistakes more than once in situations that looked like this one, but we had also gotten it right sometimes, and the difference between the times we had gotten it wrong and the times we had gotten it right was that when we got it right, we had been honest about our own interests, careful about the support we offered, and clear about the outcomes we would and would not accept. I drafted my response to Earth Command carefully. I sent it that evening. The response came back in 11 hours because Earth Command was taking this seriously enough to convene a session around it rather than waiting for the standard cycle. The response was 3 paragraphs, and the essential content was in the second paragraph. It said Earthspace Authority supports engagement with the identified KE internal faction on the following conditions. There were 7 conditions. All of them were reasonable. All of them were honest about what Earth wanted and what Earth would not accept. None of them were secret. All of them would be shared in full with the key faction we were going to respond to. We were not going to pretend we were neutral. We were not neutral, but we were going to be honest about that, which was a different thing from being manipulative. I drafted the response to the Keith wardens that night and sent it through the secure channel the Marin Soul had identified in the intercept. Then I went to find Sevilith. She was in a small room near the summit chamber, sitting at a low table with a group of young Velar around her. From the body language, she was teaching them something. When I appeared in the doorway, she said something to the young ones, and they moved back respectfully, and she came to meet me. The summit went well, I said. It was not really a question. Better than I expected, she said. I did not expect the Garin to speak so directly. They have been very quiet for a long time. Fear does that, I said, and so does its opposite. She considered that. You're still worried, she said. I was a little startled. Is it that visible to someone who has learned to watch humans carefully over the last 6 months? Yes. She said, what is worrying you? I thought about the K.E. Warren document. I thought about the 11 conditions Earth Command had said. I thought about the long and imperfect history of humans trying to help the internal situations of other political structures, and what that had cost and what it had built. There is something in motion, I said. Something that could be good or could be complicated or could be both at once. I'm trying to make sure we handle it honestly. You're worried you will make mistakes, Seelith said. We always make mistakes, so does every species, she said. The question is whether you acknowledge them and correct them. She looked at me steadily. You came when we told you not to. You stayed when it would have been easier to leave. You sent the K commander home with a message instead of a consequence. These are not the actions of a species that does not think about what it is doing. We have complicated history. I said every species with any history at all has a Complicated one, she said, simplicity in history means nothing happened. I would rather deal with a species that has a complicated history and has learned from it than a species that has never had to learn anything at all. I stood at the viewport of the summit station and looked out at the stars that evening. The same stars I had been looking at for 6 months from different viewpoints, from the bridge of the undying resolve and the surface of the velar planets. And now this small window in a station that had not existed when I arrived. Owen found me there at some point, the way Owen always did when he had something he wanted to say but was not sure how to say it. Commander, he said, I was thinking about something. Tell me, when we left on this patrol 6 months ago, we were 47 ships doing a routine perimeter check in the most uneventful part of the galaxy. He paused. Now we have 470 ships arriving in 60 days. We have a diplomatic coalition with 10 species. We have a training partnership with Agarin. We have a sensor network from the Marin Soul, and apparently we are in back channel discussions with people who want to change the government of the most powerful empire in the sector. That is an accurate summary, I agreed. All because of one signal, he said, one distress signal from people who told us not to come. Yes, he was quiet for a moment. Do you think they knew what they were starting the sure when they send it? I thought about that, and I thought about Sealef encoding a warning inside a cry for help because she did not want strangers to die for her sake. I thought about the careful, quiet courage that required. No, I said, I think they were trying to say goodbye, and instead Owen said slowly, they started something that might actually change how this part of the galaxy works. That is the thing about distress signals. I said, you never know who is listening. Owen nodded and was quiet for a while. Below us on the surface of the velar primary planet, the reconstruction crews were working. The fires were out. The shelters were open. The young ones who had hidden underground for 3 weeks while their world burned above them were, right now, seeing the stars again for the first time since it happened. Commander, Owen said, what do you think they called us after we left? What do you think they said about us to each other? I thought about Vthorn's question and the word his admiral had used, a thing that should not exist in this context. Probably something accurate, I said. Owen smiled. At that, it was a quiet smile, the kind that comes when someone is tired and a long way from home and in the middle of something much bigger than they expected to be in the middle of, but they're not sorry about any of it. Commander, he said, what happens next? I looked out at the stars. 470 ships were coming. 10 species had just decided to stop being afraid. An internal K faction had reached out in the careful language of people who wanted to change something that had been wrong for a very long time. Savalith was in a room nearby, teaching young ones the way she always would have been if none of this had happened. We keep going, I said. That is what we do. He nodded. Commander, the stars did not move. They never did, but everything else was moving now in a direction that I thought cautiously and without certainty was the right one. The kind of right that is not clean or simple or free of cost. The kind that comes after you have already paid something and decided the payment was worth it. I picked up my cold coffee, because there was always cold coffee at this point in the day, and I went back to work. There was, as always, a great deal of work to do, and some I had to do